Which do you think is the most difficult part about writing in Spanish? I think that the most difficult in Spanish is the accentuation of the words. For example, the Spanish language has some particularly character that we don't have in French. When you write in Spanish, how difficult is it for you to use punctuation mark in a correct way? Well, the Spanish punctuation is different about the French one, so it's very hard for me to use it. I just started to speak in Spanish some month ago, so definitely I didn't practice enough to remember how to write by using the correct punctuation. How capable do you think you are to write with the correct use of orthography spellings? I have to be very concentrate on each word that I have to write to don't make a mistake. It's the worst part about writing in Spanish because that's take me a lot of time. But I think that I can write a sentence without spelling a mistake. What difficulties have you found in the process of learning how to use verbal tense in Spanish? I try to learn the verbs when I need to use them. In this way, I can remember them either in the next conversation. But finally, there are a lot of rules about the verbs and I don't have another choice that I have to learn them. So I learn slowly to practice better my verbs in different kind of situations. It's very difficult to learn new verbs at present, past and future. What are your main struggles to learn and use new vocabulary in Spanish? Each new word is something new to remember. If I don't use them frequently, I will forget them with time. So the most difficult for me is to find a way to use them because I will return in France and I will not be able to speak in Spanish with other people. How confident do you feel writing in Spanish? Well, I need time to make some sentence without spelling mistake. How much pressure do you feel to learn writing in Spanish since you live in Mexico? It was either, because I could write some message on my phone to communicate with people from here, but I prefer to speak than to write. How overwhelmed do you feel about the grammar rules in Spanish? It's totally new for me, so I try to learn faster than I can because I would like to have facilities to write in Spanish. How satisfied are you with your writing skill when you're writing a text? I'm happy because I can see that I'm increasing my knowledge in Spanish.
To me, the most difficult part in writing in Spanish is not to forget the question marks and exclamation marks. Um, and yes, that's it. For the punctuation marks, the most difficult is to know when to put them. I mean, after the comma, etc. Now it's okay, but before it was the problem I used to have. I think I'm capable of sorry writing without or with a few mistakes, and from a scale from 1 to 10, I think I'm on 8, 9, because I'm used to listen to Spanish since I'm a child. So, and Spanish is a language very, I don't know how to say it in English, but it's not like French. I mean, you write only what you hear, and yes, there are no. Um, I'm looking for my word. Sorry, traps. I think that it's very difficult to use the right verbs, tenses. Sorry. I used to learn that at college, and I still don't know how to use them. Um, I mean, with um, the past, which one to use. Yes, it's the past, which is the most difficult to me. Better. I don't feel very confident when I write Spanish, but it's okay because it looks like French. So main problem would be the accent. I learned the rules before when I was in my first year of college, but I still don't know them very well. I should learn them better. sorry, sorry, I forgot the question before. Um, in using new vocabulary, what is a problem to me is to know if it's formal or if people will use this word every day or not, the context, and yes, if it's polite. I don't know if I will answer the question, but to me, since I live in Mexico, the main problem is um, to write. Um, you know, I mean, Spanish from Spain and from Mexico is not the same because of the sounds. For example, um, the X. I don't know if you understand what I mean. It's different, so the writing will be different too. Or actually, not. It would not be different. Sorry, it's a little. It's not clear. Sorry. I don't feel that overwhelmed with grammar rules because I'm used to them, but I have to admit that the irregular verbs are a problem, and yes, I'm often confused when I use them, but that's okay. I'm pretty satisfied when I have to write in Spanish. In fact, I have origins in. Yes, I have origins from my grandmothers and one of my grandfather. So one of my grandfathers, sorry. So I'm okay with that. And I study Spanish, so that's okay. But yes, as I said, the main problem is the vocabulary and the accent. Accent, sorry.
Well, for the first question, I think like the most difficult part in Spanish is, for example, the ñ, as we don't have it, or the double L for pollo. Then you say, because in German you say all the letters that you write, you say them like you would say not pollos, and you would say polo. And I think this is the most difficult part of the Spanish. Then to the second question, actually, I have to be honest. I do it like how my feeling is saying, how I think it would be in English or in German. But I am not 100% sure if I put my punctuation marks always in the correct way. So it's a bit hard to say if it's difficult or not. I would say it's like normal. Then to the third question, I think I'm not 100% sure, as I learned Spanish 2 years here in Switzerland, and then I went to Monterrey half a year, but I had all my classes in English, so I never used that much of like spelling or writing in Spanish, as a lot of people in Monterrey, they are able to talk perfectly in English, so it was always easier the main language to write or talk in English. Then the fourth question. Um, in the process of learning Spanish with a verbal tense, I have to say in Spanish. I'm a bit bad and in the tenses. So for me, it was really hard. I think I didn't learn that much of Spanish. For me, it was more important to try to communicate with people rather than use the correct verbal tense. So, the fifth question. My main struggle is the verb ser y estar. For me, it doesn't have a sense. Like, even if so many people try to explain me, this is one you use it when something is for always, like always statement. This one when the emotion or something could change. I always have struggle. Like, if someone explains me, I know the rules, but if I gonna start talking in Spanish, I completely forget all the rules about the ser y estar. That's why, in my opinion, it's the most difficult part of Spanish, because in German or English we don't have it. We have just one verb of to be, and you use it always. The question six. I'm not feeling that confident in like writing Spanish. I feel more confident in when I read something, when I hear something. But I think because my best friend, she's half from Mexico, so since I'm like a little girl, I always had the Spanish in my ears. I always listen it because her mother's talking with her in Spanish, so I can understand a lot. But I never tried to talk with them because for me it was normal to talk with them in German. So I'm not feeling that confident. I would say I feel much more confident in like in the understanding, or in the in the verbal understanding, or if I read something. To the seventh question. To be honest, I love Spanish. In my opinion, it's one of the most beautiful language of the world. So that's why I decided to move to Monterrey, to Mexico, because I wanted to learn Spanish. And I thought about like it wouldn't be easier than going to this country where they speak Spanish. And also I think like I prefer the Spanish of Mexico, well, the Latin America, than the Spanish of Spain. That's why I love the Spanish, and for me it's so important to learn even more, like to get better every day. So the eight. um I think the grammar is not that it's not that difficult, as I can talk um well French as well, and Spanish. The grammar of the Spanish and of French, they have a lot of similarities. So for me, I think it's like the subjunctive. Yes, they we do have it in French as well. To the question nine. I feel more confident than talking when I write a text. As I said, it's quite similar of the French part, and if not, like I think it's a language you can try it and people try to understand it, even if there are like so many mistakes. For example, I guess in Japan, as my mother's from Japan, when you say something a bit wrong, like people they don't want or they can't understand it. But in Spanish, if you write or talk, they always try to understand it. That's why I would say like I'm not super satisfied, but I try it, and I know the people of Mexico they try to understand my text as well.
What do you think is the most difficult part about writing in Spanish?
Okay, personally for me, I think it's a kind of he is interview한대요. So right. 그러면 it's quite different from English. So most difficult part is tense.
Okay.
So a lot of verbs, tense, conjugations, things. That's the most difficult part for me. And the other one too? Okay.
I'm gonna ask
When
you,
you
when you write in Spanish, how difficult for you to use punctuation marks in a correct way?
Yes. How they go? Not that difficult for me. Okay, it's okay for me because as long as I speak or I can write in English, but for people who cannot speak and write English, probably it's quite difficult for them.
Okay,
Okay, good.
thank you. How capable do you think you are to write with the correct use of orthography or spelling?
Or spelling, orthography, I think. Oh, is
Okay. The next one is, what difficulties have you found in the process of learning how to use verbal tenses in Spanish?
just to try to memorize. Okay, just to try to memorize all the every single verbs. Okay, like the present, futuro, like pasado, kind of like every single word. I just try to memorize.
The next one. What are your main struggles to learn and use new vocabulary in Spanish?
For me, it's like maybe main struggles like maybe different pronunciation. I think that's probably makes me more difficult.
How confident do you feel writing in Spanish?
How confident? Like I am more confident in writing rather than speaking because it's like once because I can't really the every single word is not doesn't really come out when I just right away when I think. So for me like writing is better, like easier, más fácil.
How much
Pressure
do you feel to learn writing in Spanish since you live in Mexico?
Not that pressure, but I don't really like to do personally. I don't really like to do the computers here in language here. Okay, so because it doesn't really help me and it doesn't really correct me, so I don't really like doing. That's more pressure for me. The doing in computer. Okay, and
Then is, how overwhelmed do you feel about the grammar rules in Spanish?
I always try to compare with English. So if I compare to English, once I understand it, then bang, it's easy. But I think for most of Asian, find out probably very difficult because it's an opposite structure. So if people cannot speak English or any other like languages, like European languages or any other language, maybe they find it very difficult in grammar.
Okay, the last one is, how satisfied are you with your writing skills when you write a text?
Not satisfied, but I'm trying. I'm trying. But for me, like I want to speak more Spanish. Yeah.
The most difficult part for me about writing in Spanish is probably making sentences and making them in the correct order. So that's the most difficult part about writing in Spanish. I do have difficulties with the punctuation marks because I often don't know when to use them. So I often just forget about them or yeah, that's the most difficult part about the punctuation marks. Spelling for me is not the most difficult part. So I think I'm doing a good job. It's more the grammar that's difficult, but the spelling is okay. The most difficult for me about learning verbal tenses is mostly learning about the past because there are two ways to use the past, and I'm not really sure how to do that, which one to choose. and the present and future are fine. I can learn. For me, the most difficult part about vocabulary is mostly writing and using it. I can understand vocabulary really easily. Um, it's similar to a lot of other languages, so I often can understand it by recognition or just by the context. But really using them and making them up myself is really difficult. So writing and speaking is not my best part. I'm not yet really confident in writing in Spanish. Um, I don't like making too many mistakes, but I know I still do them because I haven't learned so much yet. But yeah, I really want to learn more and I can understand a lot, but writing it myself is still really difficult for me and I'm not confident in it. I'm more confident in writing than in speaking, but it's still not something that I feel really sure about. I do feel some pressure about writing in Spanish because um, I still have to learn a lot, and for me to be able to express myself in Spanish, I really need to learn how to write and to use the correct grammar and use the correct words, and that's still really difficult for me. And I'm trying to learn a lot, and in the Netherlands, I've tried to learn a lot as well, but I still have to learn a lot more. So I really have to study hard, and I feel pressure for to be able to do this correctly. In the beginning, I felt really overwhelmed with the grammar rules in Spanish because I think there are a lot of them, and they're really different than that I'm used to, like in English or in Dutch. So that was really difficult for me at first, but now I start to understand them more and I start to recognize them more in text that I'm reading. So it's getting more easy and I'm not so overwhelmed anymore as if I were in the beginning. I'm not satisfied yet when I write in Spanish because I know I make a lot of mistakes. Um, but I am satisfied with how far I've gotten since I've started learning it. So I am satisfied with the level from the start, but not the level that I want to be at the end. But I'm glad.